So Jimmy Dore had Richard Wolff on his show to talk about vaccine mandates.
No, we are not anti-vax at this show. We are anti-mandate, right? And that is supposed to be the lefty position. And
Why?
Dr. Richard Wolff tweeted this out yesterday and it made some news. It says it's not pro versus anti-vaccine. The issue is class struggle. Have employers, dictates, mandates become intolerable for employees, record job quitting?
I think that you really need to start there by just educating people about how vaccines are safe. Because, like, most people are refusing the vaccine because they're fucking stupid. And, like, they have no idea of what they're talking about. And they have zero education. And they saw, like, a spooky Facebook meme. Others buy into a lot of conspiracism and believe that they are somehow just fighting this war against the elites that are trying to vaccinate them or whatever. But employers have always been able to, quote unquote, dictate vaccines for employees.
So I just want to remind everybody that Dr. Richard Wolff is standing on very solid ground when he says this, because this is Dr. Fauci when he was first asked about mandates last year, about 12 months ago.
And do you foresee that the vaccine might be mandated for any populations, perhaps for school-age children?
No, I don't think you'll ever see a mandating of vaccine, particularly for the general public. Sometimes in the health sector, like
this doesn't
in my hospital here at NIH, you're not going to be allowed to go on the ward unless you get a flu vaccine. But you would never mandate, at least I do not think you would. I'd be pretty surprised if you mandated it for any element of the general public.
Wait, what? When he says mandate it for the general public, it's pretty fucking clear what he means is that there's not going to be like a mandate for people who are like US citizens, the general public. The private sector can mandate shit. OSHA can mandate shit within the private sector. He said there wasn't going to be a vaccine mandate for the general public. And Jimmy Dore's over here like, whoa, look, a contradiction. No, fool, you just don't understand it.
Now, as a primary care physician myself, who's had many conversations around vaccine safety with patients, I'm curious, what's our contingency plan for people who might refuse the vaccine?
Well, I mean, they have every right to refuse vaccine. I don't think you need a contingency plan. If someone refuses the vaccine in the general public, then there's nothing you can do about that. You cannot force someone to take a vaccine.
In the general public. Why is he just looking like he's got some kind of an own here? Yes, it's unlikely that it's not going to happen at all, that the federal government will mandate a vaccine for the general public in the sense that if you are a US citizen, you must get vaccinated. That's not going to happen. The government cannot, or the federal government cannot do that. State governments can. And the private sector also can mandate vaccines for their employees.
Okay, that was Dr. Fauci a year ago. Here's also Nancy Pelosi a year ago.
So here's the thing. We cannot require someone to be vaccinated. That's just not what we can do. It is a matter of privacy to know who is or who isn't.
So it seems like Dr. Fauci and
Wait, why didn't you play more of the clip? I feel like we're missing some context there right away.
Nancy Pelosi are talking about a principle.
But also, even if Pelosi did say this, who gives a fuck? It's Pelosi. Does anyone take her that seriously?
And those are the principles that lefties are supposed to be adhering to. And so that's not about, well, if the science changes, then we can mandate. That's not what they're saying at all. They're saying, no, you can't do this as a matter of principle. Joe Biden was also asked last year when he was president-elect, are you going to enforce mandates? And here's what he says. Are you going to enforce mandates?
No, I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand to be mandatory, but I would do everything in my power. Just like I don't think masks have to be made mandatory nationwide.
But now,
nationwide! Oh, he said nationwide! You should have cut it sooner, buddy. It almost sounded like you were proving your point there, but then he said nationwide and ruined it because once again, he's correct. The federal government cannot mandate masks or vaccines nationwide, but he said he was going to do everything in his power to make sure that people were vaccinated, and in his power is OSHA.
this is from the ACLU. It says, far from compromising them, vaccine mandates actually further civil liberties. They protect the most vulnerable people with disabilities and fragile immune systems, children too young to be vaccinated.
Wait a minute. Oh my God. Oh, Jimmy, you're proving nothing. It says opinion. These rights are not absolute. They do not include the right to inflict harm on others. While vaccine mandates are not always permissible, they rarely run afoul of civil liberties when they involve highly infectious, devastating diseases like COVID-19. There's also like long court precedent that this is acceptable for private companies to enforce it. So what was he mad about? Again, an opinion guest essay piece from some people at the ACLU that are pro-vaccine mandate.
And communities of color hit hard by the disease. Now, what is the argument against that? Well, first of all, it's funny that they put liberty and mandate in one sentence. That's very funny. And Robert Malone, who invented the mRNA vaccine technology, retweeted that and said, war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength.
Oh my God. One, he didn't invent it. He contributed very valuable research to the development of the mRNA vaccine, sure. But again, that was created because a fuck ton of people, a fuck ton of scientists and researchers combined, working together, made the mRNA vaccine what it is today. So to act as if he's like this sole inventor who just like created it in his little basement workshop is just bullshit, first and foremost. Second of all, this is like the go-to grifter response, dude. Like, this is the go-to, well, Robert Malone, the notoriously anti-vaccine guy that had some contribution to the mRNA vaccine in the 80s, who I wrongly attribute to being the inventor, said the vaccine isn't good. Shouldn't we listen to him? Like, it's just quoting a George Orwell thing about vaccines, too. That's very cute.
But here's the argument against what the ACLU just said. The argument, coronavirus immunity passports are not the answer. A system of immunity passports in the United States threatens to exacerbate racial disparities and harm the civil liberties of all. Any immunity passport system endangers privacy rights by creating a new surveillance infrastructure to collect health data. An immunity passport system would divide workers into two classes, the immune and the non-immune, and the latter might never be eligible for a given...
Wait. We already have medical infrastructure when it comes to healthcare, right? Doesn't he claim to be a leftist? Isn't he all about health, Medicare for all or whatever? That would be creating a new medical infrastructure.
To take the slot. Given the lack of scientific support for reliable immunity determinations, no significant policy decisions should currently be made on the basis of presumed immunity. There are better ways to both advance public health and protect individual rights that we should focus on in order to emerge from this crisis without creating a new privacy-invasive data infrastructure that threatens everyone's rights. And who said this? Who was giving the counter narrative, the argument against the ACLU? Well, it turns out it was the ACLU. So that's what the ACLU used.
So one, there was an opinion piece by two people that worked at the ACLU published in the New York Times. Second of all, you're comparing that to what the actual ACLU published in 2020? May of 2020? When did the vaccines come out? Yeah, vaccines weren't even around yet. Immunity passports. They're saying if you already caught it, then here's the... This is an entirely different thing. This article is talking about people that already have immunity and making a database of people that have immunity. But now we're talking about vaccine mandates. Everyone gets the vax, you get your passport, and you're good. Immunity passports are different than vaccine passports.
From Fauci to Pelosi to Biden to the goddamn ACLU, which we know turned into a bunch of shit libs, and it's because of Trump.
What?
So guess what? Why do you have a vaccine mandate if the vaccines no longer prevent transmission?
Oh my God.
So you're going to get, as Andy Slavitt, the COVID director, said.
Oh my God. Does everybody just read the headline and not go any further? COVID-19 vaccines no longer prevent. COVID vaccines cut the risk of transmitting Delta, but not for long. So this is, again, why it's important for everybody to get vaccinated immediately and as fast as possible. Because even if it slows down after like 3 to 4 months, which is what this study found, as far as preventing transmission, we can still seriously slow the spread of COVID to the point of almost eradicating it. Second of all, the study does show that people who become infected with the Delta variant are less likely to pass the virus to their close contacts if they have already had a COVID-19 vaccine than if they haven't. But that protective effect is relatively small and dwindles alarmingly at 3 months after the receipt of the second shot. So there's a couple things here, okay? First and foremost, stopping transmission is never actually the main goal of any vaccine. It's actually to stop the symptoms of that virus or of the infection. So why does everyone need to get vaccinated if it doesn't stop transmission? First and foremost, it does cut down transmission to a degree, and even if it's not even if it doesn't last very long, that still matters. Second of all, we know that if you get vaccinated, it still lowers your likelihood of getting the virus to begin with. It does. It absolutely does. And so when that happens, you might be able to, you know what? I think we're going to do we're going to copy both how Vosh and Destiny do it now. So like if you're here, okay, and you're here, and two little people are chatting, okay, you might be able to transmit still, okay? That might be able to happen. But if you have a whole group of people, okay, all over the place, and then only some of them can because they're less likely to spread the virus to begin with, you lower the transmission on a group level. Individuals, you might be able to transmit it, you might be able to transmit it. In a large group of people, in a society, Joker face, when you're less likely to get the virus, that means you're obviously less likely to spread it because you must first get the virus in order to spread it. And so you do reduce the transmission in a broader sense. It's that simple, really. So that's the first thing, is that one, it does actually reduce transmission, depending on how you look at it. Two, even if it doesn't reduce transmission at all, it still reduces symptoms and hospitalization, which goes back to the point that I already made before, which is hospital resources. Even if you're able to transmit the virus, if you're able to stay home for 2 days and then you're better and you don't need to go to the hospital, you are preventing further straining our hospital resources. And when our hospital resources are strained, we all suffer. COVID, no COVID, vaccinated, not vaccinated. If you have to go to the emergency room, or if you need an ICU, or if you need the attention of doctors or nurses, and they're preoccupied with COVID-19 Delta variant surges, you're not going to be happy. That could affect all of us. So that's why people should get vaccinated. Is even if it didn't stop the transmission at all, which it does, but even if it didn't, it still matters because our hospital resources shouldn't be strained. I don't need to save this. Thank you, though.
Everyone's going to get COVID. You can't get away from it. It's like the flu. You can't get rid of the flu. You can't get rid of COVID. And the vaccine no longer prevents transmission. That's according to the CDC. Now, you tell me what the rationale for mandates are. It's not about health. Because vaccine...
It is about health. It's about all of our health. And if you are to have some kind of health issue, even if it's unrelated to COVID, if you're not able to get into the hospital, you're going to have a problem.
Protect the person who got the vaccine. It no longer protects the person who didn't. So if you need the vaccine, you should get the vaccine because it will protect you from serious illness and hospitalization, but it will no longer prevent you from transmitting it. So a mandate to get a vaccine to protect other people is anti-science.
Also
and they're doing
true.
it. 9,000 New York workers leave as a vaccine mandate takes effect. So those are cops, those are medics, those are EMT, those are firemen.
Yeah, so again, we kind of have to back up here. This doesn't mean vaccines are bad. We need to ask why these people are so scared to get vaccinated.
Those are firemen. Nurses are in short supply. Employers worry vaccine mandate could make it worse. Chicago school bus drivers quit in droves. Over 10% of their bus drivers quit.
Wow.
Those are blue collar workers.
Really, this just speaks to how fucking downhill our public schools have gone. That we have this many brain dead anti-vaxxers that are willing to risk their job because they're too scared to get a shot. Oh my God. Just because Joe Biden said to do it. Jesus.
Workers of color. Workers rally against New York Presbyterian's COVID vaccine mandate for staff.
I don't care.
And by the
Why
way,
do we
only
care
20%,
about any of this?
80% of young black, but it's also dunking on the most vulnerable workers in our society. Here's the New York governor.
It's almost as if the people that are more vulnerable tend to be more in poverty and sometimes lack education. Maybe that's why they're more susceptible to anti-vax bullshit, and maybe that's why it's more likely that they would consume your kind of content, Jimmy Dore. Or should I call you Jimmy Dimwit?
Orders National Guard to fill New York hospital shortages caused by staffers not vaccinated against COVID. You're firing healthcare workers in the middle of a pandemic. I don't think this is about health. And you're replacing them with that.
Oh my God. It's like every cliche anti-vax argument just coming from someone that claims to be on the left. What the fuck are you talking about? This is such a dumb argument. That's like being like, we need bus drivers. We're running low on bus drivers. And then like a 15-year-old comes up and is like, hey, I can drive the bus. And they're like, no, you don't have a bus driving license, and also you're too young. What? I don't really think they actually need bus drivers. I mean, they had a possibility to get a bus driver, but they got rid of him. What? It's like, yes, they need nurses. Yes, they need healthcare workers, but those healthcare workers need to reach a certain standard. Actually, let's look at it this way. If you are a healthcare worker, it's much more likely that you could get COVID, right? You shouldn't be risking your own life. And more so, you should get the vaccine so that if you are to get the virus, then you're not going to be out of work for a week and a half or have symptoms that get worse and worse and worse. And again, it does reduce your likelihood of getting it in the first place.
Here's the New York governor orders National Guard to fill New York hospital shortages caused by staffers not vaccinated against COVID. You're firing healthcare workers in the middle of a pandemic. I don't think this is about health. And you're replacing them with National Guard, who also are not mandated to be vaccinated until June 2022. Did you know that? That half the National Guard aren't vaccinated and they don't have to be mandated until June 2022?
Holy shit, are you serious, Jimmy Dore? Man, it would be a shame if that was literally incorrect and a quick Google search was able to pull up a USA Today fact check article. Fact check, National Guard members would need vaccination to help with New York healthcare. So the claim was New York governor fired all hospital staff who didn't get the shot and replaced with National Guard. But the National Guard isn't mandated to get the shot until June 2022. The claim stems from a contingency plan New York Governor Kathy Hochul disclosed 2 days before the vaccine mandate went into effect. In it, she said the state could consider calling in the National Guard and recruiting medical workers from other states or even overseas to cover shortages if needed. However, if called, National Guard members would have to be vaccinated. The state's health department told USA Today. The state hasn't called the military to aid in work-related shortages. However, if it did, service members and other workers assisting would have to abide by the mandate and be vaccinated. Nice work, Jimmy Dore. What's the difference between you and a right-winger again?
So this isn't about health.
Yeah, it is.
Black Lives Matter of Greater New York blast the vaccine mandates as racist and disrespectful. Is he a Trumper?
No. You don't.
Richard-
Wait, it's not just Trumpers that are against. Like, you can be a Black Lives Matter person, but also be dumb when it comes to vaccine shit. Like,
Wolff says it's not pro versus anti-vaccine. The issue is class struggle. Have employers' dictates, mandates become intolerable for employees? Record job quitting, strikes, refusals of max vaccine mandates say yes. Anti-mandate movement is not all right wing or anti-vax. Its labor militancy component deserves interest and support. It's an important opportunity to fight the right and build the left. So let me...
what? Its labor militancy component deserves interest and support? Wait. So I guess he's saying because they're striking, we should be supporting them for striking? Usually when you strike, it's because of like unfair worker conditions or not being fair, like paid fairly, not because your employer asks you to get vaccinated, which is the agreement you already made when you began working for him.
Its labor militancy component deserves interest and support. It's an important opportunity to fight the right and build the left. So let me, and by the way, let me just to drive this point home, you're going to mandate somebody who already had COVID get a vaccine, even though they have greater immunity than the vaccine provides? This was asked to Dr. Fauci.
These are right-wing talking points. These are just right-wing talking points at this point. Natural immunity is better. No, we just had the new CDC study, which came out and showed the opposite, that it wasn't actually better.
By Dr. Sanjay
There was a study
Gupta.
that came out of Israel about natural immunity, and basically the headline was that natural immunity provides a lot of protection, even better than the vaccines alone. What are people to make of that? So as we talk about vaccine mandates, I get calls all the time. People say, I've already had COVID, I'm protected, and now the study says maybe even more protected than the vaccine alone. Should they also get the vaccine? How do you make the case to them?
You know, that's a really good point, Sanjay. I don't have a really firm answer for you on that.
Okay, all right. So now you know this mandate is complete bullshit and has nothing...
Wait, what? Oh my God, dude. I'm just going to stop pausing it every time. This is just, oh my, fuck off, dude. This is so dumb. You didn't even let him respond.
to do with health. He doesn't even...
This was pre-Delta. Yeah, it's always, there's always some nuance lacking because you have to be a brain-dead idiot to actually be anti-vax.
even have an answer for a question he knew was coming because there isn't an answer for it. But he is captured. You know what regulatory capture means? That's what this guy is. He's the poster boy of it. So now let me bring in Dr. Richard Wolff. Always happy to talk to him. He's the host of YouTube show The Economic Update, Democracy at Work, author of many books, including his most recent, The System is the Sickness, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. Pleased to have with us Professor Richard Wolff. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Jimmy. Glad to be here.
So now how would you respond to the what you just saw here and the pushback you got from just saying that? Explain to people how about this is about class struggle.
Okay, I'd be glad to. I think the way to start is to recognize and to applaud, at least if you come from the political directions that you and I share, Jimmy, that there is a kind of rising of working people that we haven't seen in a long time. The government keeps these statistics about people who quit. We are having record numbers of American workers, many of them returning to jobs after the pandemic and taking a long, hard look at that job and coming to the conclusion, if I can quote from a country and western song from a few years ago, you can take this job and shove it. And that's what they're figuring out. Now, it's not the best moment. It's a risk they take. Jobs are scarce. But you know, when people have had it, when it has built up for too long and it's too strong, they may not choose the best moment, but they said, I'm out of here.
So I get what he's saying is that, like, we should be demanding better representation in the workforce. But, like, again, you can do this in the current democratic system. Joe Biden is working right now on buffing up unions and getting rid of coercive contract. And that's all within the current system. We don't have to be blaming capitalism or the class struggle or whatever to recognize these issues that can be fixed within our current system. I also recognize what he means, though, about, yeah, like rising up and demanding better worker conditions, but, like, do that then. Support people that are fighting for a good cause. Just if they're like, I'm gonna just go on strike. Like, what if the job was like, hey, we're gonna start donating money to LGBT people, and then the workers decided to go on strike because they didn't like trans people and they didn't want to work for a company that did that? Would you be like, well, we should support those workers because they have anti-work sentiment? Doesn't the cause matter for why you're striking? Does that matter?
Like this anymore. Number one. Number two, we're seeing a strike wave, the likes of which we haven't seen for a long time. You know, Kellogg, Nabisco, John Deere, there's a whole bunch of them, and many that we don't even know about that are smaller and don't get coverage. But I want to make a point about that. It is getting more coverage than labor struggles used to get. Yes. It's almost as though people in the media all over the place smell or sense that something is going on. And so for me, when I watch the working people that I know saying, I don't want to be mandated, I understand that it's mostly not about the details of the science. They're not familiar with all of that. It's not about that they don't believe in vaccines. They've been vaccinating themselves and their children for a long time, and it's a normal procedure of life. But they don't want to be told again what they must do by pharmaceutical companies and government bureaucrats for who.
So you're admitting that they actually have no argument and are just being petulant children saying no because they were asked to do it? Also, what do you mean told what to do by the pharmaceutical companies? I thought you were just talking about the anti-work sentiment. I thought it was about the employers dictating this. Now you're saying pharmaceutical companies? And also, for a lot of these people, it is about the science. Absolutely. When you talk to them, they always say some bullshit about myocarditis or how this is the first mRNA vaccine or how it doesn't stop transmission, or how they always have some science-y sounding, like, you know, at the end of the day, dumb fuck excuse.
Whom they have lost what little respect they had. And so they're pushing back. And if they don't get a vaccine, I think that's a shame. I'm vaccinated. I'm glad I'm vaccinated. I understand your position about it as well. But I don't see this as an issue so much of science or of what the CDC says. This is a movement that the left should be in there saying, you're right to be angry at mandates.
This might be misappropriated definition, but is this partially class reductionism here? Like, he's reducing it all to this, like, class struggle when that's not the case. A lot of people are uneducated, ignorant, and some are just defiantly stupid and are refusing to get a safe and effective vaccine, which risks their fellow workers, themselves, and everyone around them.
And you've done that well without being pro-mandate. By the way, you know, the whole history of the labor movement is not to allow the employer to dictate to you what you are going to do. And, you know, I'm the person who believes that the majority of people have an interest in...
That's every job! That's what a job is! Where the employer dictates what you do!
Not letting that happen. Do I always agree with the target? No, and it doesn't matter.
Hunter, you're not understanding Richard's point here. Yes, I am. His point is that people are having anti-work sentiments, and rather than us mocking them for being against mandates, we should instead try to mobilize that anger into more anti-work sentiments. But what I'm saying is that the reason they have that anti-work sentiment to begin with matters. If they're underpaid and they're fighting back against that, then absolutely that would be something good that should be mobilized. But if they are mad about getting a safe and effective vaccine because they're stupid, then no, that should not be mobilized.
I really appreciate you saying all that. That's,
I'm sure you do, Jimmy.
100% right. They'll mandate a vaccine, but they won't mandate you get health care if you get sick from the virus or the vaccine. They won't mandate that you have health care. And we now know due to studies that when they did this.
How does he pivot to that? We need health care. We should have health care. yes, we should, but also you should get vaccinated? Also, I thought he was just reading that spooky article about a new healthcare infrastructure. And now you're talking about Medicare for all. What is that besides a new and different healthcare structure?
Study 600,000 people in the United States had died from COVID. And they determined that a third of those people, 200,000 of them, would still be alive if the establishment, the oligarchy, the government would have given them Medicare for all. We now know that universal healthcare would have saved 200,000.
I like that. The oligarchy, it just shows their lack of understanding. No, there's a democratic process. And it turns out, my dude, that when you say, let me make sure I'm getting this right, Medicare for all, I believe that's like Bernie Sanders' thing, right? Which is like the furthest left you can possibly get. It's unelectable. It's unattainable. It's not going to happen. And it just shows his lack of understanding that he'd be like, why don't they just flip the healthcare switch? You know, Jeff Bezos, he's got the button right there on his desk. He could push it. We all get healthcare. That's not how this works. Things have to be voted in. That's called living in a democratic republic. Now, maybe if you're against democracy and you want to fight against that, that's your purview. Fine by me. But don't act like they have the ability to just hit a healthcare switch, when in reality, this is a nuanced discussion that requires people vote on this policy. A policy that is extremely radical left, even compared to other countries that have embraced multi-payer systems or a public option.
So I've seen a lot of people criticizing Richard Wolff for his appearance on the Jimmy Dore show. I think that he is 100% in the correct, at least in his assessment of things. I think he more or less got his general argument correct in the sense that as people who claim to be pro-worker, the left are kind of responsible for helping workers try and get vaccinated in a way in which does not push them towards anti-vaxx movements that on the right, as well as.
But wouldn't you argue that validating their protest against vaccines does just that?
Well, no. Mostly because he wasn't talking about validating the protest against vaccines. He was validating the protest against various other work conditions, and then saying that vaccines are just another thing that's being brought up in the conversation.
The main thing was, though, was the main subject of the conversation that we just watched was about vaccines, though. Yes, I mean, he literally ended by saying the science might not even make sense.
Okay, so what he was saying is that right now we have a lot of strikes that are going on for various reasons. Most of them have to do with being overworked, being underpaid, not being given the benefits, all sorts of things. And these things are being covered in the media, and we as pro-worker people should be taking advantage of this. However, the main conversation being had around workers right now is vaccine mandates, something that employers are going to be inflicting upon their employees amidst this whole striking thing. Now, we've already seen that there's a lot of people who end up just quitting their jobs outright if they're forced to take a vaccine. So obviously the vaccine mandate does not actually cause them to take the vaccine if they're going to just quit their jobs anyway. So those people obviously are not going to be affected by a mandate. Now, supporting
I'm going to be a little bit, I can be charitable to what he was saying here. So I'm reading into a little bit on why this is happening. And you are right that, so what this one person says is after a pandemic, usually after a big crisis, when things begin to improve, workers can become more militant. I think the fact that this coincided with the Great Resignation is also crucial because we've seen a tremendous upsurge in workers quitting jobs in the private sector, and that's unusual. In August, we set a record for such quits, and what I think that shows is there's a broad dissatisfaction that workers feel, and that's giving workers who are organized more leverage. So, let's see. Yeah, so hold on. I'm trying to see if there's anything to do with COVID at all. We're about 80% of what we had before COVID struck. So basically what he was saying is that there's a lot of strikes happening and we should be taking advantage of that, which I agreed with all of that. I know there was the strike wasn't it Frito-Lay's where there was some bad working conditions and shit going on there. So I understand that. but I disagree that we should, just because they are striking against their job, that we should then validate that because we agree with them striking against their job.
It's not about validating that. Both Richard Wolff
You're validating them by telling them that they're
no
in the
he's
right.
pro-vaccine and he thinks that you should take the vaccine. So when they say I don't want to take the vaccine, his response is, but you should. Like it's not validating them being.
No, he said they don't want.
anti-vax.
They might not want to take it ultimately because the government said to, or they don't want to listen to what their employers
that
are
might
saying.
be one reason they don't want to take it. So then, how do we address that? What do we do to get
Well,
them to take
employers
vaccines
are
if the mandate's
already
not going to do it?
Well, actually, that's not true. We've seen now after the mandate, there's been upticks, of course, statistical upticks in people getting vaccinated.
There are other ways to give those upticks. Plenty of different
Like
states
what?
have provided a lot of different incentivization programs that have worked tremendously.
Like what?
Whether they be vaccine lotteries that have been instituted in various states that have caused massive upticks in people
does
getting
that
their
mean?
vaccines.
What's a vaccine lottery?
So several states have put in this idea of, hey, if you get a vaccine, we're going to enter you into a lottery, and everybody who gets a vaccine, you're going to all be in this lottery, and we're going to pick a number, and that person gets like $1 million.
So they would just argue that that was coercion. And
Who
also,
would?
that's not going to actually work. It might work for
Well,
some.
no, it has.
Okay,
Like,
fine.
it actually has.
Okay, let me walk that back then. It might work here and there and in some states, and if so, that's great. If that's working for them, they should keep on doing it. However, that's not going to work on a policy level. So I don't think that Joe
It was
Biden or
instituted by
anyone
the
else
states.
could. So I don't
That's
think.
a policy that the states instituted, is to create this program.
All right, let me look this up here for you. States.
I have like a giant list of various state
vaccine
incentives that have
lottery.
been instituted.
Oh, Maryland's doing it. Maybe I should have. Damn, I should have done this.
Yeah, it was incredibly
Increase COVID
effective. And Maryland's
vaccinations.
also doing a $100 financial incentive to state employees who get the vaccine as well. They're not mandating their state employees get the vaccine, but they're like, hey, do you want an extra $100? And that's working.
Great, but also with the OSHA thing, like, again, you need a way that ensures more than just like people willingly go to get vaccinated because they might win money. Like,
So
you need
these
a way to
things
ensure
are-
that people get vaccinated. And when we're talking about people in the private sector where OSHA already has that ability, I don't see the problem there. There are incentives also within that policy. So, for example, you'll get the next day or two off, paid time off, to deal with any unwanted side effects. There are ways to pursue religious exemptions. You don't need to get vaccinated if you work from home or if you're outside for the majority of your job.
Those aren't incentives to get the vaccine, though. Those are just allowances for if you were to get the vaccine or if you don't want to get the vaccine. An incentive is something that, like, I'm going to benefit somewhat from getting the vaccine.
I mean, 2
That's
days
what an
paid
incentive
time
is.
off. 2 days paid time off is pretty good benefit.
Well, I guess, but most people who probably have like jobs usually have some level of paid time off anyway. And if the idea is, well, you're only getting this paid time off because we're expecting you to be deathly fucking ill for 2 days, like that's
Well,
probably
no,
not
you might
good.
not get deathly fucking ill for the next 2 days. Like, a lot of people don't, and if you do, just feel a little
No,
gross.
you're,
Like,
you're right. Most people don't. I'm vaccinated. I didn't experience any side effects whatsoever outside of my arm being like somewhat sore for an hour.
right. So maybe the semantics of calling it an incentive isn't right, but I mean that the possibilities, the way forward is provided for these individuals. They're able to get vaccinated. They're able to take the time off. They're able to seek a religious exemption if necessary, and
Sure.
they're not forced to do it if
But
they
let
work
me-
from home.
Let me ask
Like,
you a
what else?
question. Do you think the vast majority of people who are not vaccinated right now are just people who are just like, the vaccination is going to alter my DNA? Do you think that's like most people who aren't vaccinated?
I don't know, but I would be willing to say that most people that are like adamantly refusing to get the vaccine, and especially if they're willing to go on strike and risk their job because they're against the vaccine, then I would most likely think that they
I think
are
it's more
suffering from
reasonable
some
to
kind of a
assume that
brain
they just don't
worms.
like being told what to do. And you're right that that's like a petulant thing, that like they're being children about it, but you still have to deal with that.
Yeah, but then what's the argument there? There is
Then
none.
you have to
If
provide
you-
something other than a mandate, because a mandate's not going to get those people to get vaccinated because they don't like being told what to do. And they'll
No,
just
we
quit their
shouldn't have
job.
to
They would
work
prefer it
around
to be
them. They should be complying here.
Well, they should be, but they're not. They're quitting.
And then
So
yes, and then
now
they
what?
might lose their job for it. Like this.
Okay.
Yes.
So now what? Because we still need them to get vaccinated, right?
I mean,
They
yeah,
can't just
but
quit
I
the
mean,
job
what
and be
else
like,
are we?
"Oh,
What
well,
else
I
are we
guess
gonna
I don't get
do?
vaccinated anymore."
We can't pay everybody $1 million to get vaccinated.
No, we're not talking about paying everybody $1 million to get vaccinated. It's one lottery that one person's going to win in a state. I mean, I think that's not.
You really
not
think that people that are already willing to go on strike against their job would
because they
willfully
don't like being
go?
told to get a vaccine? And the only reason for it, obviously, is because it's been heavily politicized, mostly by the right at this point. And that's not a great thing, but we need to be able to address that. If there's a bunch of people who are going to be quitting their jobs because they don't want to get mandated to get a vaccine, we still need them to get vaccinated, right?
So I agree with you. So maybe we could do something side by side where it's like it's mandated that you get the vaccine if you work here, which is like a standard job requirement anyway. But if you, for whatever reason, are willing to be petulant enough to literally lose your job because you're too scared to get a shot, then maybe you can also go down to the local shop and do the vaccine lottery.
Can we also accept the fact that there is like just a subset of the population that regardless of what you put into place, you could threaten them with jail time. They're not getting a vaccine. Like these are people who booed Trump when he said that you should get a vaccine. These are people who are like, no.
Well, yeah, of course there's going to be there's always going to be some people, but those people, like, again, you just can only do what's available. Like, you need to get vaccinated to keep working at this job, and if they refuse, if they're willing to lose their job, well, all right, then that might be the consequences of what happens.
I think for those who are not of that ilk, who would actually quit their job and probably go homeless in order to not get a vaccine just to say they fought against the system, I think those people are going to be entirely unaffected by the mandate. And I think for the people who aren't like that, who would quit their job regardless because they just don't like being told what to do, those people would probably be a lot better motioned towards with proper incentivization programs. I think a mandate is unnecessary.
This is like,
and I think that
it's like, do you realize this is the equivalent of people? Do you realize that like if someone gets fired for not getting the vaccine, that's like the equivalent of being fired for not like going to a sexual harassment conference? Like it's just failing to meet the bare minimum requirements of what the job demands. Like.
I take all of these different like things that employers are allowed to tell their employees to do on a case-by-case basis. Some of them I feel are reasonable, some of them I feel are not.
Okay, well, it's reasonable to ask them to get vaccinated.
To ask them, but
to tell them they need to get vaccinated, it's also reasonable.
I don't think so.
Then again, is it reasonable? So is it reasonable to force them to go to a sexual harassment conference?
Yes.
Why?
Because that is something that is necessarily going to be a cultural thing that they're going to have to learn, mostly because for the most part in society we don't teach people how to properly navigate these various different intersex communications, and that's something that's necessary for them to be able to do in order to be able to properly work with their fellow coworkers who are going to be.
How is this not comparable to the vaccine?
Because the vaccine is something that is purely based off of what they themselves are going to do to their own selves, not to other people necessarily. That is involved because obviously you can get sick and get other people sick. However, ultimately it starts with doing something to yourself, not to other people. Sexual harassment is something that you always do to another person. It's not something you do to yourself.
No, because we're not talking about sexually harassing people. We're talking about going to a sexual harassment conference.
Well,
so you would have to go there.
The purpose of the sexual harassment conference is to prevent
better
people from sexually harassing people by
right,
them
and
on
is to
proper
better
ways to
your
navigate those conversations.
Right, and is to maximize your performance and the smooth your performance at the job. And it would be the same.
I'm not going to overgeneralize like that.
But it would be the same thing if but the reason I'm making that is because it would absolutely apply with the vaccine.
There's
as well.
lots of things that you can do to force people that you can force people to do to make them quote unquote better at their jobs or able to do their jobs.
And part of that is making sure that they're not infecting other
them to do.
No, you're right. And it's not unreasonable to ask that they, one, don't put other people at risk, and two, ask that they please don't risk themselves getting sick and compromising their ability to properly do the job.
To ask, but you know what?
No, to tell them to. I'm going to walk that back. Not to ask, to tell them.
No. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. The forcing bit, as far as vaccinations are concerned, is something that I have a personal problem with, and I think Richard Wolff has a problem with, which is what he was saying. I think it is more than reasonable for these jobs, instead of saying, hey, at no cost to us, we're going to force you guys to get vaccinated, and if you don't, well, we'll just replace you. Instead of encouraging that sort of mentality and allowing employers to just get off the hook on being able to treat their employees better, tell them hey, if you want them to get vaccinated, and by the way, you do.
But that's not treating the employees badly.
It is.
No,
because
it's
they have
not.
alternatives.
The
every
employees are
employer-
disrespecting the workplace at that point.
Every employer is more than capable of incentivizing their employees over, like, threatening them. Every one of them.
This is how everything is with the job. This is why you keep saying I'm overgeneralizing, but it's actually the truth. You go to the sexual harassment conference to better protect the workers. You go to the sexual harassment conference because it matters with workplace safety and your overall performance on the job. And the same thing goes here with the vaccines.
Sure, and I can send a bunch of people. And I can send a bunch of people who work at a fucking Target to go to a hospital and learn about the various different.
So why is it not wrong when why is it not wrong when an employer says, "Hey, you're going to be fired if you don't attend this sexual harassment conference"?
I'm saying, I've already explained this to you. That is something which you necessarily do to somebody else, and you have to be taught how to not do that, because the society that we currently live in does not teach you proper ways in order to handle that sort of navigation. However, when it comes to a vaccine, that is something that you do to yourself first.
Go.
That is a
How does this not apply to the
difference.
sexual harassment thing? You first have to walk through that door and sit your own ass down in your own chair.
No. We're talking about a vaccine. We're talking about something that your average person probably knows jack dick about, and they're like, I just don't want to get it. It's a needle. I don't like needles. You know, I don't know what the fuck their reasoning is. There's various different reasons. Most of them are probably stupid, but it doesn't matter. The point is, they don't want to do it, and it's a part of their body that you're asking them to just grit and get over it.
Yes.
And a lot of them are going to respond with being like, well, fuck you then. And then they leave. And now we haven't solved the problem.
I mean, we might have. The only way that you might be able to solve that problem is to get rid of the defiant employee. Yes, that could be
vaccinated, and then we haven't solved the problem.
You're basically just saying like, oh well, rather than having the employer be able to ask their employees do the bare minimum for workplace safety,
I don't understand.
We should instead be incentivizing them.
Yeah, sure, there might be other ways that you can incentivize it, but fuck these workers. They have to do it or fucking get lost. If they don't have a job, if
fuck
they go
them.
homeless,
Yes, fuck them.
No, I hate this. Why are you so anti-worker?
I'm not anti-worker. It's because I'm pro-worker that I don't want other workers. No, it's because I don't want other workers to get sick with COVID.
They deserve to starve.
I'm literally saying that other workers shouldn't get sick with COVID and shouldn't be put at greater risk.
Various different workers are going to be put at risk for every day on this
You just got on me for making a statement this broad, and now you're making the exact same kind of broad statement here.
Yes, because you are making a statement that's broad, and I'm explaining to you why that broad statement can be applied to a variety of other fucking things that we don't fire workers over. Like, it's very simple.
And I can give you a variety of things that we do fire workers over. Usually, workplace safety is the bare minimum requirement.
You're not addressing my central thesis that there is a alternative to firing everybody who doesn't get a vaccine that is very effective and has proven effective, and at least on a state level, not only on just the general public, but also for federal employees, that doesn't involve just firing them if they don't get a vaccine. And you're like, I don't
Well,
give a
actually,
shit.
I would
Fuck
like
that.
to walk this back just a bit, because they wouldn't necessarily be fired. They might just have to wear a mask and get tested weekly.
Oh, okay, fine. If that's the case, then I don't necessarily have much of a problem with that. Since, you know,
because I mean, that's what
it
the
would be like a
OSHA
dress
thing
code.
is. That's what the OSHA thing is. But there is the loophole.
But there are loads of people who are actively calling for workers who don't get vaccinated. Fuck you, get fired. I don't give a fuck. That's what.
Well,
that's
so
what
they're saying. They're not going to make that decision ultimately. Ultimately, the employer is going to make that decision. And again, I feel that I am addressing your central thesis, because this is ultimately about workplace safety. And you keep saying, but the employer has a right, or the employee, it's their body or whatever. Again, the employer asks that you wear certain shirts to work. The employer asks that you control your body in certain ways all the fucking time.
Do in terms of dress codes and things like that, which is why I already explained to you.
So it is your body that you are being told.
There is a very big difference. I think you can accept that there's a very big difference between saying, yo, if you come into work, you're gonna have to wear a mask, and yo, if you're gonna come into work, get this fucking needle in you. I think your average person is going to be like, oh, well, fuck that bit on the ladder.
Don't
Your
most
average
jobs
person's probably not going to be cool with that.
Aren't most people who are employed isn't that how they get their health care?
No, god damn. I have had like 10 jobs. Not a single one of them has asked me to get a single vaccine on anything.
Well, that doesn't really mean anything. I'm saying that
Like,
overall,
like employers just generally speaking don't give a fuck.
okay. So maybe doesn't that just prove more of the reason why there should be the mandate? Because if employers if employers don't give a fuck, then they're probably not going to work very hard to enforce it unless the federal government, OSHA, steps in and threatens to fine them $14,000 per violation.
What it shows is that employers should give a fuck, that they should care. That doesn't necessarily
You have
mean
to
that they
make
should
them
care.
give a fuck. And that the threat of being fined is that forcing them. That forces them to give a
Yes,
fuck.
But if you threaten to fine them and then you accept that anything they do to avoid that fine is fine, then that's also a problem. There has to be guidelines on how they have to
There
enforce
is a
that.
guideline. So the OSHA thing that we
No.
have right now, there are guidelines.
That guideline can't include, by the way, if they don't, just go ahead and fire them.
Why?
Because it's a fundamentally anti-worker sentiment.
No, it's not. Okay, by
Yes,
this
it
logic.
is.
So when is it okay to fire a worker?
When they are inefficient at their job, whatever that job might be. There's a variety of different jobs.
So what if
out
you're a
there.
healthcare worker? I could argue that
If
you're not getting vaccinated.
If you're a healthcare worker, I would accept that because
Okay.
they do in fact have to get vaccinated from various different things purely as a result of the fact that they regularly work around those things all the time. That
Okay.
stuff I can accept.
Okay, gotcha. So you're talking about
Like
people that are working.
when you go into healthcare, you do so knowing that that's something that you necessarily are going to have to do. So
Right.
they already consented to that essentially just from the onset of.
But
wanting
like
to pursue that job.
the employees or the employer can already fire employees for like failing to comply with certain like workplace standards, right? It's not always
Certain
just
workplace
not
standards,
efficient
sure,
workers.
Certain workplace standards. However, adding a new one and then just saying, by the way, this is going to be something we can fire you over.
That's
you
not-
can't just say they have the right to do it. So
It's
therefore
not a
it's
new
okay.
one. I don't think that's a new one. I believe when you work in a job that most jobs disclose and all that paperwork and whatnot, that they have the right to mandate vaccines. This isn't something
Here's
new.
here's what happens when most people get hired to a job.
Wait.
They
You
sign a
realize that there's
W-2
court
form,
precedent on
taxes,
this, right? That like
and did a
employer
background check.
You realize that employers can mandate vaccines for employees, and there's like court precedent on this. This has been ruled.
Sure, they can. I don't think they should. That's the point. We're not talking about whether or not they have the ability to do so. We're talking about normativity.
Right. And so from your standard, like unless they are inefficient at their job, you really shouldn't be able to fire them. Which, do you realize how dangerous of a standard that is? What if they're
Not
hyper
really, 'cause there's
what if they're
various ways
hyper
in which you can be inefficient at your job?
what
not
if they're
attending your
really
job being
hyper
one of them.
efficient at their job, but they also sexually harass their secretary?
Oh gosh, there are obviously multiple reasons you can fire somebody.
So
Let's
couldn't
not
you be
stupid.
highly efficient at your job, but also be a workplace safety hazard?
A workplace safety hazard in
Yes.
the sense that you don't. Yeah, sure. But here's what I would say. This is something that's new and something that a lot of people don't really have much of an opinion on. A lot of people just haven't gotten one because they don't see a reason to. And if and the only reason that you are that you want to give them is, well, do it or you get fired, I think that's incredibly small-minded. We could just be incentivizing them, and that would be just as effective and also
I mean, we've
benefit
been
them.
trying to do that by making it free, by making it available everywhere,
No,
by
these are
making
not
sure there are ways that people
incentives
can
to
get
it.
Yes,
Making
no,
it
some
free is
people
not
get
an
rewards.
incentive.
People, and then you know what? Conservatives make fun of the fact
It's
that
like-
I
it's
got a
like-
jelly bean, LOL.
it's
Like,
like, for
we've
instance,
tried the
Let me give
incentivization.
you for example. It's
But
like,
you
for
realize
instance,
we've
various
tried
people
all
talking
these
about how we
things.
it's like various people talking about how we can like potentially help many workers vote that don't currently vote by essentially making it a paid day off to vote on election day. That's
Mhm.
something that people do. And I would be fine with that sort of thing. What you said before, the idea of, hey, we'll go ahead and give you some paid time leave and stuff. That's good. It's probably not going to work for everybody. So I think we need to expand that a little bit more and give them like maybe a little bit of a bonus. I'm not talking about loads of money here. Most workers would be happy if you put an extra $50 in their fucking pocket.
So, what if they said it's required you get the vaccine, but you'll get $50 after you do it. Would that be better?
Okay, now you're being silly.
I'm asking you unironically, like if there was a bonus incentive. No, if there was an incentivize, if there was a bonus, like on top of that, would that be good enough? Because you and I just acknowledged that there are some people that are not going to get the vaccine no matter what. And those people ultimately might, yes, have to be fired. Because they're ultimately refusing to comply with workplace safety standards.
You know what? That is, thinking about it, that is reasonable because, yes, there are going to be people who, regardless of any sort of incentivization, are not going to do it. And then those people are going to be a problem. I think that those people need to be addressed in various other multifaceted fashions that have nothing to do with mandates at the workplace and stuff like that. So yeah, sure. We can come together on the idea of the incentive you should have an incentive paired with the disincentive.
Okay. Yeah. So the thing is that I guess I feel that we've already arrived there by the couple days off you get afterwards. I feel like that's a pretty good.
That's sufficient.
That's a paid time off that you get extra paid time off just so that you can get the vaccine. You get to chill in your bed for a full day. I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty decent incentive.
I think most people would be like, no, come on. I want something out of this. Not just like, oh, yeah, you can stay at home tomorrow.
I mean, yeah, but like what they get out of it is that they are lower, like have a lower risk of getting COVID.
You'd be surprised the amount of people who would be perfectly happy with like a Pizza Hut gift card. Okay.
I know. Hey, I'm not, listen, if your only point ultimately is just there should be more incentives, then sure. I can agree with that, I guess.
Be the driving force.
But I think that
the only reason to fire somebody is because if they are one of these people who is just like so incredibly militantly anti-vax that they would just literally go homeless before they get vaccinated.
So I was right about what I was saying about Richard Wolff then.
Stick around.
So I was right about what I was saying about Richard Wolff then. Is that ultimately it just stemmed from I don't want to do it and the mandates are still necessary?
I don't know. Because I don't want to do it as a perfectly valid reason for most people, and I think that is most people. And I think what Richard Wolff's main thesis was, most people don't need to get threatened to be fired. And in fact, adding in a mandate could cause more people to end up quitting
say
just
this.
as a result. I think
you're telling you're telling me something entirely different than what the video literally said.
What I'm pointing out is that he literally made the point that if you just say get the vaccine or you're fired, most people are just going to quit. Or at least a lot of people are, who aren't vaccinated anyway. But this new thing, this sort of coming together of let's provide an incentive, and then even if you have every reason in the world to do it, and we've given you like an actual like monetary bonus for doing so, you still wouldn't do so because you're a crazy person, you can't remain here. That, I think, would be something that Richard Wolff would be a lot more on board with.
I mean, maybe, but his original tweet, anyway, was literally on how the issue is class struggle. Have employers dictate / mandates become intolerable for employees. But, like, employers
I don't buy this idea
shit.
that the vast majority of people that don't have a vaccine are these adamant anti-vaxxers who think that it's going to change their DNA. I just don't believe that that's the case.
Okay, that's fine. But, I mean, I've talked to them myself, and you're right that they might not be that far down the rabbit hole, but most of them, if not all of them, are stupid. Yes. Either one, they're uneducated and ignorant. They're uneducated and ignorant, one, or two, like I've been saying, they are like maliciously stupid, and they're like an adamant anti-vax
I don't
demagogue.
think most people are maliciously stupid.
Anti-vaxxers absolutely are.
Anti-vaxxers are, but I think that's a very small proportion of the population that aren't vaccinated.
I feel like if you're refusing to get the vaccine,
and don't want to.
Okay. But again, we've already stop making the lazy claim, because you know that's bullshit. Because
I don't know that's bullshit.
If it was so, wait, they're too lazy to get the vaccine.
Get a vaccine
wait,
for like 2 months.
So they're too lazy to get the vaccine, but they're fine going out on strike?
No, that's not. Oh my God. There are people who would be too lazy to get the vaccine who aren't currently on strike. There's a lot of people
I got you on
there.
that some people might be lazy, but then again,
Jesus,
we weren't here to talk about random lazy people. I thought we were talking about the workers striking, but
we're talking about both, because we're talking about like the general like work environment that it persists around the entirety of the United States.
Yeah, and what Richard Wolff was ultimately saying was that we should be taking advantage of this anti-work sentiment to further fuel the left. And what I was saying, I'm going to go back to my original claim because I still stand by it and I feel I've proven it, is it's not just about workers rising up, but also the reason why they are. You would, I'm sure, would you consider it anti-worker if we said that some of these workers would be fired if they were going on strike because the job was hiring black people?
Absolutely, I would say that that's horrible.
So why?
Why what?
Why is that bad? Like, what?
Why
Why
is that
isn't
bad?
that an? Well,
There's
no,
a
I mean,
bajillion
isn't that an
reasons why
anti?
that's bad.
Isn't that an anti-work sentiment?
No, because we're not talking about what they do to themselves. We're talking about what they do to other workers.
So just what they do to themselves would be the problem.
Yes.
So what if they were protesting because like they couldn't do blackface in the workplace?
Okay, that's doing something to other people still, though.
How? It's just their body.
Because the literal purpose of it is to antagonize black people. Come on.
And and not getting vaccinated does shit to other people too, man. All right. Look,
No,
either
but
way,
the
I appreciate
purpose
the
and the
convo,
intention
buddy.
behind the
I
actions.
can't do this anymore. I'm going to pull my hair out, all right? But we'll have another convo another time, buddy. Either way, have a good one, all right?
Okay, have a good one, Hunter.
Holy shit. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click the bell so you get notified when I drop a new video.